The evening settled over our suburban home like a soft blanket, the kind of quiet that wraps you up after a long day. It was mid-autumn, and outside, the wind rustled the last of the golden leaves clinging to the trees. Inside, I lounged in my favorite recliner, a glass of merlot cradled in my hand, its deep red catching the flicker of the fireplace. The air carried the warm scent of cinnamon candles I'd lit earlier, a little ritual I'd picked up to chase away the chill creeping through the windows. The crackle of burning logs was the only sound breaking the stillness, and I let it wash over me, savoring the peace after a week of bustling around the house. I was halfway through swirling the wine in my glass when the garage door creaked open. Lucas stepped inside, his boots scuffing against the hardwood floor. At 19, he was already a tower of a young man. 6'3", broad-shouldered, with sandy blonde hair that fell messy over his forehead. He usually carried himself with an easy grin, the kind that reminded me of his father when we first met. But tonight, that grin was nowhere to be found. His hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his faded jeans, and his shoulders slumped like he was trying to shrink himself down. The hoodie he wore hung loose over his frame. The sleeves tugged past his knuckles. "Hey, Lucas," I said, tilting my head to catch his eye as I set my wine on the side table. "Rough day?" He paused in the doorway, his gaze flickering to the floor, then up to me, then back down again. Yeah," he mumbled, his voice low, barely carrying over the pop of the fire. "Grace, can we talk? Privately?" Something in the way he said it, hesitant, almost fragile, made me sit up straighter. I patted the couch across from me, the worn leather creaking under my hand. "Of course, come sit down." He shuffled over, his long legs folding awkwardly as he perched on the edge of the cushion. His fingers fidgeted with the frayed strings of his hoodie, and he kept his eyes fixed on them, like they held the answers he was looking for. I watched him, waiting, letting the silence stretch just long enough for him to gather his thoughts. Lucas and I had built something over the years. Ever since he was a lanky 15-year-old glaring at me across the dinner table, unsure about this new woman in his dad's life. Trust had grown slow and steady between us, rooted in late-night talks about school, girls, and the little things he'd never bring to his father. Finally, he took a shaky breath. "It's about Mia," he said, his voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear. "My girlfriend. We've been, talking about taking things further." I nodded, keeping my face calm, open. "Okay," I said, resting my hands in my lap. "What's on your mind?" He shifted, his knee bouncing slightly. "I've never done it before, and I'm freaking out a little. I just don't want to screw it up, For her." His cheeks flushed a faint pink, and he ducked his head lower, letting his hair fall into his eyes. I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips, not at his nerves, but at how much he cared. It was the same Lucas who'd once asked me how to pick out flowers for his homecoming date, all earnest and unsure. "Lucas," I said, my tone soft but steady, "it's completely normal to feel nervous about your first time. I'd be more worried if you weren't. The key is talking to her. Make sure you're both comfortable, both ready. There's no rush, and it's not about being perfect. It's about being there, together." He glanced up at me then, his hazel eyes catching the firelight, searching my face like he was testing the weight of my words. "But what if I mess up? What if she doesn't like it?" I leaned forward just a bit, resting my elbow on my knee. "Listen, everyone's self-conscious at first. Just ask her what she's okay with, what she wants. If something feels off, you stop. That's what matters, respecting each other. You're already ahead of the game because you're thinking about her." He let out a breath, his shoulders easing a fraction. "Thanks, Grace," he said, a faint smile breaking through. I want it to mean something, "I know," I replied, my chest warming at his sincerity. "And it will, because it's you. Just be yourself. That's more than enough." He nodded, running a hand through his hair, the tension in his frame loosening as he stood. "You're the best," he muttered, almost shy. before heading toward the hall. "Night, night, Lucas," I called after him, settling back into the recliner. The fire popped again, and I picked up my wine, taking a slow sip. Pride swelled in me for the young man he was becoming, thoughtful, kind, stepping into adulthood with that quiet strength I'd always seen in him. But beneath it, something else stirred, a flicker I couldn't quite name, warm and unexpected, settling deep in my bones as the night stretched on. The house was still as I slipped into bed, the moonlight spilling through the slats of the blinds, painting silver stripes across the quilt. Downstairs, the fireplace had burned down to embers, and the faint hum of the heater was the only sound breaking the silence. I pulled the covers up to my chin, the cool cotton brushing against my skin as I settled onto my side. My mind wouldn't quiet, though. It kept drifting back to Lucas, to the way he'd sat there on the couch, his voice low and unsteady, his hazel eyes flickering with that mix of nerves and trust. I could still see him clear as day, his broad shoulders hunched, the way his hands twisted the strings of his hoodie like he was trying to tie his worries into knots. He'd opened up to me, laid bare something so personal, and it hit me harder than I expected. I'd been his sounding board for years, the one he turned to when his dad was too gruff or too busy, but tonight felt different. There was a weight to it, a pull I couldn't shake. My fingers brushed the hem of my nightgown, the soft silk catching on my skin as I traced it absently. I closed my eyes, and there he was again, standing in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space, his hair falling messy over his forehead. I imagined him stepping closer, his deep voice murmuring my name, hesitant but warm. "Grace," he'd say, those eyes searching mine, looking for something, reassurance maybe, or more. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and my hand slid lower, grazing the curve of my stomach. I let it linger there, the warmth of my own touch spreading slow and steady, like the glow of the wine still humming in my veins. In my mind, he was right there with me, hovering uncertainly, his breath catching as he reached out. I pictured his hands, big, a little rough from working on that old truck he loved, tentative but eager, brushing against me. My breath hitched, and I pressed my fingers deeper, the silk bunching under my palm as my hips shifted slightly. It was wrong. I knew it the second the thought took shape. He was my stepson, 19 and fumbling through life, and I was supposed to be his rock, not this. But in the dark, with the house so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, it didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable. The way he'd trusted me, the way he'd looked at me like I held the answers. It stirred something deep, something I hadn't felt in years. My touch quickened, a rhythm building as I lost myself in the fantasy, imagining his low groan, the way his lips might part if I showed him what he needed to know. The wave came fast, crashing over me with a soft gasp, my body trembling under the sheets. I lay there after, chest rising and falling, the cool air kissing my flushed skin. Guilt crept in, sharp and insistent, tangling with the longing still pulsing through me. But beneath it all, there was a clarity I couldn't ignore. Lucas needed me, not just for advice, not just for words. He was stepping into a world he didn't understand, and I could guide him, be there for him in ways no one else could. I rolled onto my back, staring up at the ceiling, the moonlight shifting as a cloud drifted past. My hand rested on my stomach, still warm, and I let out a slow breath. Whatever this was, this pull, this heat, I'd figure it out. For him, for us. The house settled around me, and I closed my eyes, the echo of his voice lingering as I drifted into sleep. The next few days felt like a slow unraveling. Morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, soft and gray with the fog that clung to the trees outside. I stood at the counter, the smell of brewing coffee curling through the air as I sliced an apple for breakfast. The house was quiet. Too quiet, since Lucas had started slipping away. He'd leave for college before I could catch him, his truck rumbling out of the driveway at dawn, and when he came back, he'd shuffle through the front door like a shadow, hoodie pulled up, eyes fixed on the floor. That first morning after our talk, I'd glanced up from the stove, spatula in hand, expecting him to toss his keys on the counter and ramble about his day like he used to. "Pancakes?" I'd called, keeping my voice light. He didn't even pause, just muttered, "Not hungry," and disappeared down the hall. The soft click of his bedroom door echoed louder than it should have, and I stood there, the sizzle of batter fading into the silence. It went on like that. He'd come home, head straight to his room, and stay there. Sometimes I'd hear the muffled thump of bass through his headphones or the low hum of his laptop playing some video he wasn't really watching. The kitchen table stayed empty at dinner, his plate untouched, the meatloaf I'd made growing cold. I told myself it was nothing, just a phase. Boys his age got moody, didn't they? Maybe Mia had said something, or college was wearing him down. But by the fourth day, that excuse didn't hold anymore. The way he moved, shoulders hunched, steps heavy. It wasn't just moodiness. Something was wrong, gnawing at him, and it gnawed at me too. I tried reaching out. One afternoon, I knocked on his door, a mug of tea steaming in my hand. "Lucas, want to join me for a bit? It's chamomile, your favorite." His voice came through, flat and distant. "Not now, Grace." Another time, I caught him in the hall, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "How about a walk? The leaves are gorgeous out there." He barely looked up. "I'm fine," he said, brushing past me. "Fine." That word started to feel like a wall between us, and every time he said it, my chest tightened a little more. He'd always been so alive, laughing too loud at my bad jokes, sprawling across the couch with that easy confidence. Now he was shrinking, folding into himself like he wanted to vanish. It hurt to watch, and by the end of the week I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was eating at him, even if he didn't want to let me in. That night, after another dinner he skipped, I made up my mind. The house was dark, the only light a faint glow spilling from under his door. I walked down the hall, my bare feet silent on the hardwood, my heart thudding against my ribs. I stopped outside his room, the faint strum of a guitar riff leaking through the walls. Taking a deep breath, I knocked, soft but firm. "Lucas," I called, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "I'm worried. Can I come in?" There was a long pause, the music dipping low before his muffled reply came. "Yeah, I guess." I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dim, the curtains pulled tight, shutting out the world. Posters of old rock bands, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, peeled at the edges on the walls, and a pile of laundry sat in the corner. Lucas was sprawled on his bed, one arm flung over his eyes, the other resting on his chest. He didn't move as I walked in, but I saw his jaw tighten, his fingers curling into a fist against his hoodie. "Hey," I said softly, easing down onto the edge of the mattress. The springs creaked under me, and I set my hands in my lap, watching him. "You've been quiet lately. I'm worried about you." He didn't answer right away, just lay there, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Then slowly, he dropped his arm and turned his head to look at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, glassy with something raw, despair maybe, or shame. "I'm fine," he rasped, but his voice cracked, giving him away. I shook my head, reaching out to rest my hand on his arm. "No, you're not. I know you're not. Talk to me, Lucas. Please." He stared at me, his lips parting like he wanted to argue. But then his shoulders slumped, and he let out a shaky breath. "It's Mia," he said, so quiet I almost missed it. "We tried, and it went wrong. Really wrong." My heart sank, but I kept my face calm, squeezing his arm gently. "Okay, tell me what happened." He swallowed hard, his cheeks flushing as he looked away. "She freaked out when she saw me, said it was too much, that she couldn't, and now she's telling everyone. They're laughing at me, Grace, calling me a freak." The words hung heavy between us, and a surge of anger flared in my chest. Not at him, but at her, at them. I tightened my grip on his arm, pulling him into a hug. His body stiffened, then softened as he leaned into me, trembling. "You're not alone," I whispered, my voice fierce. "I'm here, Lucas. We'll figure this out." The next evening, I set out to make things right for Lucas. The dining room glowed warm under the chandelier. its soft light bouncing off the polished oak table I'd covered with a spread of his favorites. Meatloaf steaming in its dish, mashed potatoes piled high with a pat of butter melting into them, and a basket of dinner rolls still warm from the oven. The air smelled rich and savory, mingling with the faint crackle of a jazz record spinning on the old turntable in the corner. I'd pulled out all the stops, wanting him to feel safe, cared for, after days of watching him retreat into himself. I was smoothing the tablecloth when he walked in, his boots dragging a little on the hardwood. He'd swapped his hoodie for a plain gray t-shirt, but his shoulders still carried that slump, his sandy hair falling over his eyes. He paused in the doorway, sniffing the air, and his lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. "Smells good," he said, his voice quiet but real, the first crack in the wall he'd built. "Thought you could use a good meal," I said, handing him a plate with a grin. "Sit down, let's eat." He took it, settling into the chair across from me, and we dug in. I kept the talk light at first, asked about his history professor's latest rant, told him about the squirrel I'd caught raiding the bird feeder that morning. He nodded along, even chuckled once, a low rumble that eased the knot in my chest. The candles on the table flickered, casting shadows across his face, and by the time we'd polished off the rolls, he looked a little less like he was carrying the world. But I knew we couldn't dance around it forever. I set my fork down, folding my hands on the table, and met his gaze. "Lucas," I said gently, "how are you feeling about what you told me last night?" He froze, his fingers tightening around his glass of water, and his cheeks flushed a faint red. "I don't know," he muttered, staring at the table. "I mean, I believe you're on my side, but it's hard to shake what they're saying. I feel freakish." The word hit me like a punch, and I leaned forward, my voice soft but firm. "You're not a freak, not even close. But I get it. Sometimes words stick, even when they're wrong. Maybe the only way to shake it is to face it head on, see it for what it really is." He glanced up, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words like I was stepping across a thin bridge. "Lucas, I think it'd help if you showed me. Not to make you uncomfortable, but so I can reassure you, really reassure you, that there's nothing wrong. Just truth, no judgment." His eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "Grace, He trailed off, rubbing the back of his neck. "You sure? It's weird." "I'm sure," I said, resting my hand on his arm, my touch steady. "You're safe with me. No pressure, just honesty." He sat there for a long moment, his breathing shallow, his jaw working like he was wrestling with himself. Then slowly, he nodded. "Okay," he said, barely above a whisper. He stood, his hands trembling as he reached for the waistband of his jeans. I stayed still, keeping my eyes on his face, giving him space to move at his own pace. He hesitated, then tugged them down, his cheeks burning red as he stood there, exposed and uncertain. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just his size, though that was more than I'd imagined. It was the way he looked. So raw, so vulnerable, like he was waiting for me to flinch. I swallowed, keeping my voice soft, warm. "Lucas," I said, meeting his gaze, "there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. In fact, you're blessed. You should be proud of who you are." He looked down, his hands fidgeting at his sides. "But what if it's too much? What if no one can—" I cut him off, my tone gentle but firm. "That's not true. It's just about finding the right person, someone who sees you for you. And until then, there's no shame in figuring things out on your own." He lifted his eyes to mine, uncertainty still clouding them. "I tried that," he admitted, his voice low. "It didn't work." I paused, weighing my next move, then leaned closer, my hand still on his arm. "Would it help if I showed you? If I helped you figure it out?" His breath hitched, his eyes locking on mine, a storm of conflict swirling in them. "I mean, I don't want to make you uncomfortable." "You're not," I said, my voice steady, resolute. "I'm here for you, Lucas. Whatever you need." He nodded, hesitant but trusting, his face still flushed. I gestured for him to sit back down, sliding my chair closer. "Relax," I murmured, resting my hand lightly on his knee. "This is about you, about helping you feel good in your own skin." The air between us thickened, charged with something fragile and unspoken, but I kept my focus on him, ready to guide him through whatever came next. The living room felt smaller that night, the curtains drawn tight against the autumn chill, leaving the world outside a distant murmur. A single lamp glowed in the corner, its warm light pooling across the hardwood floor and catching the edges of the old plaid sofa where Lucas and I sat. The air still carried a hint of the meatloaf from dinner, but now it mingled with the faint musk of the wool throw draped over the armrest. I dimmed the lights earlier, wanting the space to feel soft, safe, like a cocoon for whatever this moment would become. Lucas sat beside me, his long legs stretched out, his hands resting uneasy in his lap. He'd pulled his jeans back up after our talk at the table, but the tension in his shoulders hadn't left. I shifted closer, the cushion dipping under me, and rested my hand gently on his thigh. "Relax," I said, my voice low and soothing, like I was coaxing a skittish animal. "This is about you, about helping you feel comfortable in your own skin." He nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. His hazel eyes flicked to mine, then away, a flush creeping up his neck. I could feel the heat of him through his jeans, the way his muscles tensed under my touch. Slowly, I slid my hand higher, my fingers brushing the edge of his waistband. "It's okay," I murmured, keeping my movements deliberate, gentle. "Just let go." He exhaled, a shaky breath that broke the silence, and gave a small nod. I tugged at his jeans again, easing them down just enough, my touch careful but firm. He shifted, his breath quickening as I wrapped my hand around him, feeling the weight, the warmth. His size was startling up close, but I kept my face calm, focused on him. A soft groan slipped from his lips, low and raw, and I saw his head tip back against the sofa, his eyes fluttering shut. I moved slowly, letting him adjust, watching his face for any sign of unease. There wasn't any, just a flicker of surprise, then relief as his body responded. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles whitening, and I could feel the tension in him start to unravel, thread by thread. "See?" I said softly, my voice a steady anchor. "Nothing to fear." His breath hitched, a sharper sound now, and his hips shifted slightly, instinctively. I kept my rhythm gentle, unhurried, letting the moment build naturally. The lamp cast shadows across his face, his parted lips, the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. And I felt a pang of something deep, a mix of care and something hotter I didn't name. This wasn't about me. It was about him, about pulling him back from the edge of that shame he'd been drowning in. It didn't take long. His groans grew rougher, his body tensing under my hand, and then he let go. A low, shuddering sigh as he spilled over, his chest heaving. I stayed with him, my touch lightening until he slumped back, spent, his eyes still closed. The air hung heavy between us, thick with the scent of him, the quiet intimacy of what we'd just shared. I reached for the box of tissues on the side table, handing him one with a soft smile. He took it, his hands trembling slightly as he cleaned himself up, his face flushed but calmer now, the storm in his eyes settling. "Grace," he started, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Thank you." "You don't have to say anything," I said, brushing a strand of his sandy hair off his forehead. "I'm here for you, Lucas. Always." He nodded, his lips curving into a faint, tired smile, and I saw something shift in him. Relief, maybe, or the first spark of confidence coming back. We sat there in silence, the lamp's glow wrapping around us. The throw pulled over his lap, now like a shield. The jazz from dinner had long faded, leaving just the hum of the house, the creak of the sofa as he shifted closer. I leaned back, my shoulder brushing his, and let the quiet settle. His breathing slowed, steady and even, and I could feel the weight lifting off him, little by little. It was raw, vulnerable, this moment we'd crossed into. But it felt right, like a step toward healing. Pride flickered in me, warm and steady, for the trust he'd given, for the way he'd let me guide him. The night stretched out ahead, and I knew this was just the beginning, a fragile bridge we'd built together, one I'd walk with him as far as he needed.